everyone. So my name's Brody, Mansell, and I was born and raised in Mission, BC. I grew up fishing, and I'm really proud of what I've been able to accomplish in my time out here on the water. My grandfather was one of the founding members of the Woolly Bugger Fishing Club. So when I was a young boy, I was surrounded by all these old fuddy-duddy lake anglers. And I learned how to single-hand fly cast when I was 9 years old at Lac Lejeune by my grandfather and my grandmother. So really, like, I had an early start into fishing, being surrounded by the Woolly Bugger Fishing Club, and then like my father and my grandfather just being active Fraser River anglers. I can remember being young out on the Fraser River. I think it was 2008 during the sockeye opening, and you know, Grandpa's hauling in his sockeye and I'm out there just using the guts, catching pike minnows. And that's where I think I really fell in love with it, just feeling that instant connection, the bites, and then reeling in something that's alive, you know? And from there, I can't remember a moment throughout my childhood where I didn't want to be on the water. So like, it got to a certain point, like I was fly fishing at the age of 10. I can remember being 13 years old and my mom dropping me off for like 3 to 4 hours at a time on the Dudney Slough with my 9'5" weight, my type 3 sinking line, and just stripping flies, minnow patterns for cutthroat trout. And that's really where my fly fishing addiction started. Fishing on the Dudney Slough also, it's a windy place, so it taught me how to cast in the wind. And that's like my foundation into fly fishing on the Dudney and all the small farm creeks around Mission, BC. So yeah, the Woolly Bugger Fishing Club, they do an annual derby at Roche Lake. So I went up to one of those derbies when I was 14 years old with my dad and my grandfather, and this is an unforgettable trip, cronamid fishing, watching indicators pop down, setting the hook, and watching Panask rainbows jump out 4 feet out of the lake and dive right to the bottom. So unforgettable memories when I was young, always out on the water. Not only on the Dudney Slough, but the local farm creeks. Not always fly fishing, but like when I was younger, I used to cast and retrieve a lot of spinners. Anything that imitated wounded minnows or bait fish. Anything that wanted to bite, I was happy catching when I was younger. And then it basically just kept evolving. So kind of found like my group of friends that I fished with through the end of high school, probably like 2014, 2015, when I bumped into one of my best friends, Jesse Forrester, on the Stave River. And from there, we just turned into animals. I was skipping school to go fish the Chehalis with Jess. And yeah, that's just where the addiction really took full force in my life. It was a year after I graduated high school in 2015. That's when I started working in the tackle shop. So I started working for Fred's Custom Tackle in Abbotsford, selling retail fishing gear. And Fred Helmer definitely took a notice to my passion, and he offered me, after working there for 6 months, to guide. And when Freddie asked me if I wanted to become a guide, my jaw hit the floor, because that's all I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to sustain myself being on the water. So it was an honor being able to guide for Fred. I started off initially doing trout trips here on the Chilliwack River. I would take people out in the summertime, and we would dry fly fish for the residential rainbow trout, anything that wanted to bite. So a lot of steelhead smolts. Started off dry fly fishing the Chilliwack, nymphing the Chilliwack, which then progressed into the fall. So then I was a young kid, 19 years old, taking people out for their first salmon experiences, which was just amazing, you know, watching people's excitement, seeing the bobber go down, setting the hook, and feeling those powerful head shakes of a coho or a chinook. And when you're getting people into fish, really, it's such a reward. It makes you feel like you're catching the fish. You know, you're teaching them everything from line management, setting the depth, like reading the water, properly presenting the presentation. Yeah, guiding's just been such a joy. And starting young, really, I always felt like that was what I was meant to do, because I've always been a people person, so I love being able to educate people, make people happy. And then obviously scooping up fish, like netting fish, what a joy.
How did you first get into fly fishing?
Oh, I was 9 years old, and it was a camping trip for my family for Father's Day. And we set up a big camping trip there at Lac Lejeune. Lac Lejeune's got this big fishing pier. So my grandfather, it's a big family group trip. So my grandpa goes out with my uncle and my dad, and I'm left there at the campground, and I want to fish, but grandpa's busy. So guess who taught me how to fly cast? It's my grandmother. I was 9 years old on that pier at Lac Lejeune fishing scuds. There's a full floating line with like 12, 15 feet a leader. And my grandmother and I are watching rainbow trouts just off the weed bed. And she's teaching me the 10 and 2. And we're hucking it out there, and my scud's slowly dropping, and she teaches me the strip. So I'll never forget Grandma teaching me strip, 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 and feeling that connection of the rainbow trout hoovering in the scud. Stripping, lifting, and having that rainbow trout on for the first time. I was sold. Fly fishing, that's where it took off. Lac Lejeune. Okay, so we started off fly casting at Lac Lejeune off the pier, which then slowly kind of crept into going out on the boat and trolling flies. Obviously, just dragging around a leech with a sinking line on the lake, which we did that for a couple of years. And I would fly cast where we could, really where it would permit me on the shores of the lake. But then really, as I started to mature and my fishing addiction just started to blossom, I would pressure my mother to drop me off places. So my mom, growing up in Mission, we were about 12 minutes away from the Dudney Slough. So mom, she would drive me up to the Norris Creek confluence when I was young and drop me off for 3 to 4 hours there with my 9'5" weight, my Type 3 full sinking line. And I would have a pocket full of epoxy minnows or muddler minnows. I'll never forget being a young boy there on the Dudney, just watching cutthroat trout leaping out of the river after schools of coho salmon or chum salmon. Windy place too, so it taught me a lot about hooking yourself in the back of the head. But a lot of strip, 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 strip and lifting on cutthroat trouts, and I would spend 3 to 4 hours there catching anywhere from 2 to 3 fish, maybe sometimes 8 fish, depending on the day when I was young. And then mom would pick me up, take me back home.
What's your favorite place to fish and why?
Well, it's got to be right here in the Fraser Valley. You know, I spent my whole life fishing in Region 2, and luckily I've been guiding in the Fraser Valley for 10 years now, and within the last 5 years, I've been a full-time guide and the head guide for the Upper Pitt River Lodge. So within Region 2, it's the Upper Pitt River. That is my all-time favorite place to fish, because it is truly the most exclusive river you can step foot on within the Fraser Valley. Not to mention the habitat that's still there. It's the most pristine water we have left in this major metropolitan of the Fraser Valley. Like every day while I'm guiding, I'm drinking from the river. I don't fill my water bottle up with the lodge water. I'm drinking from the glacial river. And you really can't do that everywhere you go around here.
What is your go-to fly?
If I could choose to fish only one fly for the rest of my life, it would be a couple different variances of the egg-sucking leech. You know, the egg-sucking leech has everything that trout and steelhead want to eat. There's a famous quote by Roderick Haig Brown, and he's like, there's no wrong fly as long as it's black. So first of all, black flies resemble the most food source of, you know, any coloration in the water column. Black, number one, resembles the most food. On the coast here, most of our nutrients on the coast is created from salmon. Our water here is very acidic, mostly due to our conifers. Douglas fir and cedar trees make the water very acidic, which makes the entomology, the bug life, struggles to grow in acidic water. So most of the food that our trout and our steelhead and our juvenile salmon have to feed on is coming from the salmon stocks that were here prior, spawning, or those fry hatches.
What's one piece of advice you give to someone new to fly fishing?
Just step out on the river and don't be afraid. You know, it's such an intimidating place to be because you step out on the river and there's anglers all over the place. And if you're worried about what other people think, just go up to them and make friends. Don't be afraid to ask questions because most of the people out here are super friendly and willing to help.
What keeps you coming back to the river?
The thrill of the chase. So it's all about that instant connection. Like I love feeling the electricity through my line into the graphite, feeling those head shakes, you know, really. That's the most exciting part of it all for me. But I also love just being immersed into nature and exploring rivers. When I was a young angler, going to new places was one of my most favorite things. Because in rivers, if you don't know what's around that next corner, it might be the honey hole.
describe a day on the water that really stands out to you?
Oh, there's so many of them. And, you know, all my strongest memories out on the water are all based off of phenomenal fish, you know, giant fish or giant fish experiences. So in my 15 years now of fishing here in Region 2, there's so many memories, but I can probably think of 5 really powerful memories that jump to the forefront of my mind. Like catching a 9'7" fish, a 9'7" sturgeon, catching the 18-pound hatchery steelhead. You know, catching steelhead in places where you don't expect steelhead, places where you're trout fishing and you bump into an extraordinarily hot steelhead when you're not intending to. You know, memories like that really rest deeply in the soul.
Are there any organizations or efforts you support or admire?
Yeah, for sure. It's the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition group that does a lot of habitat restoration projects here on the Chilliwack River. So I'm a big advocate of that, as well as Fred's Custom Tackle Wally Hall Memorial Derby. Because the Fraser Valley Watershed Coalition group does all the habitat restoration from the donations of the Wally Hall Memorial Derby. So I am a big advocate of that. Also, the BC Federation of Drift Fishers. So, you know, the founding director of that is Rodney Clapton. And this group has been active for the past 30 years. So there's so many fisheries that the BC FDF pushes for us to have opportunities in. And it's just a voice to basically secure and allow anglers to be able to utilize the resource.
What would you like to see future generations understand about these places?
I would really like to see the future generations noting at how important the habitat surrounding the ecosystem is. So really, I believe the river will take care of itself forever as long as we have the habitat for the river. So I look forward to the future with now logging practices and logging regulations being more suitable for river health. So hopefully within the next 100 years, we start seeing some of these cedar trees we're sitting beside reach that old growth status and getting more solidified forests on the river bottoms to protect the river health. I think that's something that young anglers and new anglers really need to understand, that it's not all about just the water, it's about everything that surrounds the water.
What does time on the water do for you personally?
It's the way I meditate. So really there's nothing in life that relaxes me more than just being out on the water, hearing the sounds of the birds and the river flowing, and just being fully immersed into my concentration of where my presentation's at in the water column. It's really the only thing I can do where I'm not thinking about the other BS in life. You know, I forget about things I have to do at home, maintenance I have to do on my truck and my boat, things I gotta go and start planning for. It's where I can just focus on me and my happiness. So truly, it's the most important thing for my happiness as an individual, is angling.
How has fly fishing changed the way you see the world?
Well, fly fishing is a universal language. So myself now guiding after 10 years, I've guided many people from across the world. And even with language barriers, there's still a language we can choose to speak, and that's fishing. So all over the world, you'll find anglers, and even though you can't speak the same language, they understand this. That's universal, my friend. Well, I think that there's a problem here. A voice just don't sound right. Well, I left myself on the answering machine, said I'm back in town tonight. I feel I stepped out from the wilderness, all squint-eyed and confused. But even babies raised by a wolf should know exactly when they've been used. See, when it starts to fall apart, man, it really falls apart. Like a boots and hearts, and where they start, they really fall apart.